playing those shows with Pretty Lights, like the episodic dates that I did, and Red Rocks, and now being managed by the same manager, and those people that have become some of my best friends, was kind of like the first scenario where I felt like I had like a place in the music industry. They welcomed me in like I was like part of their crew, which was amazing. So definitely family vibes, and I'm super excited to see what Derek's going to do. I will say that at a certain point, when he was absent, I hated being directly associated with him all the time. Like I didn't want to be just like a Pretty Lights artist as much as I loved that was my intro. Um, I think I've managed to kind of carve out my own lane so much more so than when I started, which I'm really proud of. Um, you know, I have my lane that I can't really compare to a lot of other people, which is kind of the goal. Um, so I'm happy that I got away from that direct kind of like underling situation that I felt when I was coming up, which was totally amazing and necessary in the beginning. But yeah, it's cool to be able to reconnect with that family where I am now.
Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, dude. I'm doing good.
Yeah. Yeah, right on. Maddy O'Neal in the house today. Hey, we've been meaning to catch up for a while, and I've been really excited. Your last album, Ricochet, I was listening to that last night and just really enjoying the tunes. I think you explored some wonderful territory musically, and you feel like you've just grown as a producer exponentially over the last few years. I'm super proud of you. I'm so glad to be connected and have you on today.
Yeah, thanks, dude. I mean, we've known each other for, I was trying to think yesterday, maybe like at least like 12 years or something, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think Gravitas is coming up on 13 years. We worked together through your project Crooked Drivers, which was you and like a partner at the time. And
Yep.
um, I didn't know you super well at the time. And I thought like one of the things that was interesting is I didn't know who was doing what in the project. I just thought, hey, this is a really cool sound. It was very much inspired by that electro soul vibe and Pretty Lights and Chromatic and all of the Grizz and the stuff that was happening there. I thought, wow, these two people are awesome. And then
Yeah.
like later down the road, I guess you guys split up, and I don't honestly even remember the partner's name, but then to see you kind of emerge as your own project was really exciting. I thought that was great.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's like I've been in the industry for, making music for 11 or 12 years. But this solo project, like, it really feels like I'm in a pretty cool place right now, and trying to think back about, that whole journey and how I got here and rebranding and starting a solo project. It's just, it's just wild. Like, and you've seen the whole thing unfold too. So it's cool to have people that you've known from the very beginning, and compliments hit the hardest, but especially coming from people that have seen the whole thing. So I appreciate what you're saying about the new record too.
Oh man, yeah. And I saw this tweet the other day from you. It said 12 years ago today, I played my first show ever with my old music project. You were a sophomore at CU Boulder and had the opportunity to play a raw showcase in Denver. And you played an all original set of beats in Ableton. I mean,
Yep.
that's amazing. You kind of didn't really, fully know what you were doing just yet, and I mean, that's quite a journey,
Yeah.
right? 12 years. And so you said you launched the Maddy O'Neal project how long ago was that? 5, 6 years ago?
I think it was in 2006.
Okay.
So
Or
yeah, it's
16,
actually been,
2016.
but yeah, oh yeah, yeah, sorry, not six, 16.
That's awesome.
um, but yeah, I mean, from the very beginning, it was just kind of like, uh, diving in and taking risks, not having no idea what you're doing, but setting a bar and kind of meeting yourself there. So I thought that was a cool post that came up in my timeline too, because thinking back, I'm like, wow, that was like pretty ballsy to play an all original set like a year into making music. Like I could have just DJ'd, you
Yeah.
know.
Heck
But
yeah.
I was a producer before I was a DJ, so like, you know, I just that's all I do.
Yeah, I think that says I mean, I feel like that says a lot about you. Like, just kind of, it seems like every step of your career, you're like jumping in, head first. It sounds like on this latest record, you were exploring new territory, and there was tons of really great collaborations. Your track with Balkan Bump, you have a track with Sync, who's like
Yeah.
a dear friend of mine, and she was part of the Gravitas
Yeah.
group through her group Baseline Drift. So to see you connect with her was amazing, and I think that song
Yeah.
is
I think I
absolutely
found her from you,
yes. Yes, that's awesome.
yes.
I love it. I love it. I love this community so much. I feel like I'm a little jealous of well, not a little. I'm a lot jealous of the Denver community. Like Austin's dope, but hands down, Denver is just the scene. I mean, you guys are so tight. There's so much amazing stuff happening
Yeah.
there. Like,
It's pretty crazy to see how much it's grown over the last couple of years too. Like it's always been a hub, but it's like exponentially getting more of one or becoming more of one.
yeah, I mean, I know artists that are moving there simply because it is that hub. It is sort of like the success is creating the success more and more, and people start moving there. And yeah, I'm jealous. I mean, I've got so many great venues, obviously Red Rocks and Cervantes, but it just the list goes on and on. It seems like there's more every day too.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I live here and every single day someone says the name of a new venue and I'm like, what? Like I feel like I have my finger on the pulse and like I know nothing. Like it's for too much now. I'm just like, what's going on? There's like a new pop-up, like late night
Wow.
thing happening. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's, there's no shortage of like space for that here too, which is surprising. You'd think that like with the amount of venues and the competition, like there would be like a max, you know, but it, I don't know. People are popping up, doing their thing, starting little communities everywhere, and I think that's the coolest part is there's enough kids to go around these days
Yeah.
that there can be full night parties happening at the same time and still nobody somebody's not going to get in.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the heart of it really is, I think, obviously Live Nation is a player, but AEG, Scott Morrill, Cervantes, like there's such a like special thing that has been happening for a long time and is still happening there. And I think that
Yeah,
that kind of ties into like you need a hub for a community where people meet each other and then you start to build and then things can spread. So I feel like without Cervantes, like Denver wouldn't be what it is. Obviously, Red Rocks is a huge deal, but
I I definitely agree. I mean, Cervantes gave me some of my first opportunities ever, and
yeah,
then Scott and the whole staff there became my family, and you know I met most of my best friends like at that venue. Whether it was at one of my shows or going to see other ones. Definitely like the go-to spot to hang for a really long time, and it still is when I'm here. I'll check out their lineup, and there's always something going on.
yeah. I wanted to ask you about Envision Festival. I know that was your first year to play. I think that might be my favorite festival in the world. Like, can you tell me any highlights from Envision?
I had heard so much about that festival for years, and I was really excited, and it blew away all my expectations. I knew it was going to be incredible, but it was just so well done and curated, and like just I don't know. I didn't expect them to have their shit together, just being in the middle of the jungle. You know what I mean? And it was just like it blew me away. Um, and my experience on my set was amazing. I had a pretty special moment at the end of the set. It was actually my dad's birthday, who passed away back in 2006, actually, when I started this project.
Wow.
But yeah, I got to say happy birthday to him at the end of my set. Like, with everybody else, like in unison.
I want to give a little special shout out. My dad passed away a couple years ago. Tonight is his birthday. Can y'all say happy birthday, Bob? Who can you real quick? Alright, nothing. A little thin red light USB to go. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday, Bob!
So yeah, it was pretty special. And then the rest of the night, I had people coming up to me, giving me hugs, and saying how special that was to them. So it kind of created a moment for other people that had kind of lost a loved one. So, but it was like a happy moment. So
Wow.
that was cool to be able to have it on stage.
What was your dad's name?
For me and Bob.
Oh, rest in peace, Bob. And what I was reading about your dad, he also was a musician, right?
He was, yeah. He had a band called the Evening Stage. He actually went to Harvard, became a lawyer, and then left Harvard to start a band on the East Coast. They had a gutted out Wonder Bread truck as their tour vehicle, and they just toured the West Coast, which is, I wish I had a photo of it, but I don't. But yeah, so he was very musical. He was in a band. Yeah, I was heavily influenced by him and, the music that was around growing up, blues and rock and roll. And my brother was in a bunch of indie rock bands as well. So yeah, I was definitely in a musical family growing up, but I didn't really find my place until later on.
Wow, that's awesome. My dad was also in a band, and he was the bass player, and this was in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and their band name was Holy Cow, which
Yeah.
is a phenomenal name. Like, I can't believe more people haven't used that one. That's a damn good name.
Yeah. Yeah, you better copyright that shit.
Yeah, he tells the story of one night there. This is like in the early '80s, as the disco era was kind of coming to a close, and they're playing like a line dancing bar, and someone's like heckling them during their first set to play disco, and the lead singer of the band, his name is Jack. Jack's just like kind of heckling back to this guy while they're playing. They have set break, and then they come back to play the second set after they've had more drinks and probably some other substances. And eventually, this guy keeps heckling. Jack jumps off the stage, starts to fight this guy. My dad is still plugged in to his bass, and
Oh God.
he's got a stack behind him, right? And so my dad jumps out to go help the fight without taking the bass off, and the stack comes down. Tube explodes, show's over. They end up in jail, and
What?
it's like a New Mexico jail where apparently, I mean, this is all secondhand told to me, right? I'm like a 1-year-old baby or something, and the jail it's just cinder block room that the ceiling, or it's taller than you can jump, and so you can't climb out. But there was no roof on this jail apparently, and they're just out there in this.
What? That is some New Mexico shit.
Yeah, some holy cow. So I think they called themselves like psychedelic cowboys or something like that. They're like oh man.
Amazing. My some of my dad's bandmates actually sent me. They got some of their records remastered and sent me them. And there's some really hilarious like live shows.
Nice.
Just like you can hear like the banter and shit like that in the background. So yeah, it's pretty cool to have.
Heck yeah, those are treasures for sure. That's awesome. Well, I guess next I wanted to hit on your mom. Like I was reading about how you
want to hit them?
No. No. I wanted to speak about your mother with you, please, if you would, so inclined. You had mentioned that she's a feminist, and I just wanted to say, like, are there any examples of that, and like how that has influenced you, and how how that's helped you in your career?
Well, growing up, both my parents were lawyers. My mom actually studied women's studies, and did a lot of work with just kind of like domestic violence cases, and like just really like she was like a social justice warrior almost in a way. And then my dad was kind of a personal injury lawyer, but he was the artistic one, and my mom was very headstrong in academics and doing all of that. But yeah, I mean, I think growing up with two parents like that, especially a mom that was saw no obstacles in her path, you know, especially at the time that she was coming up, you know, when female lawyers were a lot more rare than they are today, you know, in the path that she took. So I think I was definitely raised in a way that like paving, carving out your lane and whatever you're doing is like amazing and very possible, even if, you know, there's not many people before you or females before you. And I didn't really think about that necessarily when I got into music, but it became more and more apparent the deeper I got that, you know, I was one of fewer females, especially when I got started. I could probably name the DJs that I knew on like, you know, one hand that were females as, you know, direct inspirations or mentors. So yeah, I mean, I think her and I bonded over the years when she saw that I was paving a way in the electronic music world or just the music industry in general. So it was actually, you know, she was skeptical of my career in the beginning, but that was kind of a way that I seeped into her and kind of like made her understand what I was doing a little more when she saw that aspect of my career, which was really cool to have that moment with her. And she's like, "Oh, like she didn't realize how rare it was
Yeah.
either." So
Wow.
it's cool.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, you know, as you know, I've managed Closey for a long time, and that was something that I was aware of, how few women were actively touring and kind of at the top tier of, you know, of the industry. But we quickly saw like what an impact she was making. I think in particular, I saw her play,
Yeah,
and I saw how many women were at the front of the stage watching her, and I had that realization, wow, she is inspiring the next generation. And I realized how
yeah,
important that was for everyone. And that's what people talk about, representation. It's, you know, we're seeing this influx of Korean actors and movies, and how it's really important to see yourself in those positions so that you can believe that you can do it
yeah,
too. And so, yeah, huge deal.
totally.
I mean, I feel like it's getting better this year at Lightning in a Bottle. You know, I managed the Thunder stage. We had, you know, more women than we'd ever had play. We had more LGBTQ plus people play. It was, you know, more diverse and good. You know, Toki Monster, Canna Bliss, Zen Selecta, like, and all women that are phenomenal at what they do. This isn't, you know, these are not handouts. These are not
Yeah,
because we're trying to, you
totally.
know, diversify the stage. I think there is some of that happening, you know, and it's a difficult like conversation or line to walk about like how do we do this in a way, because we need to put people up on stage so that people see themselves, so that the next generation, so that it does become balanced. But at the same time, we don't want to just put people there who maybe aren't as talented or aren't as qualified. So I think I do think it's
Right.
getting better. What do you think is sort of the next steps? What do you think, is there anything else that's left to be done? I mean, I think there's still a lot of people running, the men running the show for the most part. It seemed like the next kind of
Yeah. I mean, I think we've made huge strides. Like what I was saying, when I first got started, I only knew one person to contact, and it was actually Alicia
yeah,
when I was like looking for female mentor. Like my resources were very slim in that realm. So I can only say, personally what I try to do as well. I was doing a lot of producer DJ lessons over the pandemic too, and I think it was a really cool experience for me because I had so many people, females, take lessons from me that they were like, you know, I was intimidated to do this with a male, and I'm actually doing a DJ lesson tomorrow with Kurt Rediker's daughter, who runs New Conscious. So I'm trying to always be a resource for people and be accessible, especially for females, to know that like I'm a safe space to talk about stuff with or to learn things from. I want to be able to do my part in, being that mentor that I didn't have. Necessarily, well, I did. Alicia was a great mentor once I reached out to her, but
Yeah.
I think we've made huge strides, and I think we just need to keep doing what everyone is doing. I don't know. I just think that over time, there's going to be more and more females that get involved in all aspects of the music industry, and the more it's just going to keep spreading slowly. I don't think it's like an overnight
Yeah.
fix.
No, I think it's a generational thing for sure.
Yeah, it's been cool to see people actively, even like rosters and festivals, and there's been a lot that I've seen that I thought was really cool of people actively being conscious of all these things. So I just think we have to keep doing that, and the change will spread over time.
Yeah. One of the things that my mom actually told me was it really does have to do with gender roles. And I think when you're a boy, you're sort of taught to try and fail, and if you fail you get up and you rub some dirt on it and you try again. And I think women are taught to be pretty perfect princesses, and so they're not taught to fail, they're not taught how to fail, they're not and so if you're supposed to be perfect,
Right.
that means you can't fail. And I think I had this conversation with Alicia too, was like that is such a hard part of learning to produce. It takes so much trial and tribulation, it takes so much
Yeah.
failure. And that's the same thing with sciences and computer science and technology. And so I think that's a big part of it. So I think as we raise our children, teaching them equally how to try and fail is like that spirit will give you the resiliency to kind of take on something that's more technical in nature.
Yeah, I never really thought about that. I mean, obviously the tech industry is one and the same with learning a DAW and learning how to produce. And there's, you know, fewer female in tech worlds all over the place as well. But I didn't think about that being one of the reasons why, but that definitely makes sense.
Well, and I think it does, and sometimes it does shake out. Like my wife is in the tech industry and she's kind of evolved her role. And I think for a long time, maybe it was in a lower role, but now because of her attention to detail and her ability to communicate and her ability to write and certain things that I think, these are obviously stereotypes, but I think women sometimes have are inherently kind of better at some of those things. She's now in
Yeah.
charge of a lot of things where before, so I see it both ways. And I did want to hit on that you taught this class in Costa Rica. Tell me about that.
Oh yeah. That was in 2020, like right before the pandemic
Wow.
happened. I was invited to Costa Rica to teach a women in music retreat. It was like 50 women in the middle of the jungle. It was at like an ayahuasca ceremony location. 50 women, I think, ish. And I was in charge of teaching the the Ableton production portion. So I built like a 12-hour curriculum on like beginner production using Ableton. And that was actually my first teaching experience back to the way that I've lived my career is I say yes to things that I don't necessarily know how to do, and I figure it out in the meantime. So I was like, yes, I'm a teacher. I'll see you there. So yeah, I built a 12-hour curriculum, and that was one of the coolest experiences I've ever had. Um, Obviously, I tour with a lot of men, and I'm around a lot of that energy. And just being in a place like that for a week with all of that feminine energy and like this divine female like power was like a crazy experience to me because I've never felt anything like that, number one, but also just being able, everyone felt so comfortable and it was like this safe space for people to learn. It was just like this really powerful exchange. And a lot of those people, those women became students over the pandemic too. They continued to take lessons from me virtually. One of them is playing shows now, which is awesome. She lives in the Bay Area and she's killing it. So it's just cool. Like,
Wow.
yeah, places like that I think are a great way to facilitate, you know, representation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Also, is like communities or like fostering learning spaces where people feel comfortable to take that first step because it's a hard one.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I mean that seems like a really the natural bridge in a way that as you're setting the example, then you've opened yourself up to being, available to help people and teach people. And also kind of the specialty of it, like you understand, an aspect of the industry that many people can't really teach, and you're showing them what it's like to tour and what it takes to, maybe get a record signed, and all of that is, man, so that's amazing. That sounds so fun. Well, yeah. Is there a way that if people want to
Yeah.
book you that they can reach out? What's the best way to connect with you there?
I'm not actually currently doing
Okay.
lessons because I just too busy. Like I'm doing this one with tomorrow with Kurt's daughter. That actually just it was like a graduation present, and I was like, I'll open my
Got
books for you.
it.
But I definitely I try to read as many Instagram messages. That's kind of like the place that's best to contact me of any of the platforms. And I will say I'm super available to anyone that has any questions, or I listen to people's music that they send to me and give feedback. I try and do that as much as possible. While I'm touring, I haven't really been doing lessons. I do miss it, but I think that if there was some females that hit me up wanting to do it, I might make an
Awesome.
exception. But I'm not currently taking students,
Right on.
but I am available.
Well, yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're developing and or have developed a relationship with boundaries and priorities, and I was reading kind of how you were saying that you have a more like established ritual in for getting ready for the studio with yoga and things like that. I did want to ask you about that. Like, how has that helped you? I guess tell me about that process, and then like how you think that's helped you.
Um, well, I think that the pandemic kind of was like a huge slap in my face. I was, I was a little caught up in the lifestyle of touring and partying and kind of, just wasting my time more so than I'd like to admit, which I think everybody goes through a phase and has to figure that out. Um, but I'm happy to say that I'm like the happiest and healthiest I've been in a really long time. Um, and I think that that coincides with all of the routines and the habits and the rituals that I've put into place over the last year or two. And yeah, one of those things is definitely like I wake up and I do yoga every morning that I'm home, at least. It's hard to incorporate that on the road. That's kind of my next step is how to figure out carrying these rituals into
Where you need
touring.
it most, yeah.
But that's yeah, everyone's still trying to figure that out. but, you know, like establishing those rituals when I'm home so that I have the balance of being on the road and coming home and knowing that I have this grounding routine that I can get back to it immediately rather than like having this transition be chaos. But yeah, yoga is huge just for, you know, mental and physical health, and just kind of, I'm not a morning person, so um, I figured if I did that directly when I woke up in the morning, that it would maybe help with, you know, the boot of my body in the morning. Just kind of switching up my habits to try to maybe become more of a morning person, or, you know, get the workout out of the way so that I can focus on other things too.
Huge.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, that's just having a morning ritual in general. I didn't used to have that because when you're on the tour and you wake up in a different place and it's just chaos, you know, you can't wake up and make a matcha and have your little routine and sit down at the computer, and, you know, it's totally opposite worlds. So I think once I kind of was able to have a home life and routine that was the grounding part that I needed, was kind of what I was missing. I would come home from tour and not know what to do with myself. I'd be like, well, I miss my friends. I'm going to go out and see them, you know? And like, I didn't have the, the recharge time that was totally essential for me, uh, creating and like, you know, accomplishing all those things that I bring on tour with me, you know?
Yeah, I mean, speaking of that, Grizz, I'm sure you saw, but Grizz just announced like he's just gonna, after October, take a sort of an indefinite hiatus. And I mean, kudos to him for potentially
Yeah.
getting ahead of, complete and total burnout. I cannot imagine. I mean, for the people listening, like the
Yeah.
the and I haven't done all that much touring, but the touring I have done, it is exhausting and can be so
Yep.
demanding on not just your physical body, but your mental, your emotional energy. And like you said, the routine of you're staying up late and then there's an early bus call, or you got to you're taking an early flight, and then you may have travel complications, and then access to any sort of decent food, like all of that, especially if you're sort of trying to
Right.
make it, if you're trying to get to the higher tiers. I mean, I think once you're an established name, things get a little easier, but the pressure and the stress are, still there. So I mean, you're saying what,
Yeah.
when you are on the road, like what are some of the things that you have found that help you with those things?
Um, Getting more sleep or trying at least. And like back to just like the boundaries. You know, especially when you're coming up, like I used to say yes to like every single after party because I wanted to go out and meet people and talk, and, you know, I was just pumped about everything, but I was just burning myself out and feeling like I couldn't say no to things, even if I knew that I was not going to bring my best self to a scenario. I would still do it just because I felt like it was part of what I should do. So just having the wherewithal to have those boundaries now after, you know, touring for as many years as I have. You know, I did like 2.5 months on a bus with Cherub, and that was like insane. That was the craziest tour I've ever did. And that was even in like a comfortable environment. I had like my little tour bunk coffin that I could disappear in. But, you know, just like I think that everyone, no matter how much of a social person you are, needs the alone time to recharge or just to like process things, because this life also is like it's constantly a what's next mentality. Before you're even done with something, you're always thinking to the future. Um, so I think being able to process and really like, you know, fully take in what just happened, or like something that you accomplished, or, you know, just living in the moment is a little hard sometimes. So I think I'm trying to practice more those stops, you know, take those stops and like take it in.
That's really healthy. I can relate to that, and that's one of the reasons why I'm actually not doing as much artist management as I was. I think at one point it was, you know, Closey, Beats Antique, Dirtwire, Blue Tech, Desert Dwellers were all kind of on the roster. And it was so like that stress was compounding because it was always what's next. And no matter what, somebody was having some sort of challenge. And I think that I mean I had Il Gates on the podcast, and he said like 75% of active musicians have some sort of mental health challenge. And I mean it is a really difficult uh, profession because it's just nonstop. The
Totally.
pressure that you put on yourself and that the industry puts on yourself to continue to be producing and be on social media is just, yeah, I'm sure it's very overwhelming.
Now there's the extra pressure of like being ever present on social media too, and I think that was kind of that's what is putting a lot of people over the edge, is because like you can't just come home from a tour and chill. You have to like still tell people what you're doing all the time, you know. So I think more and more people put up boundaries and like normalizing talking about it, number one, but also not abiding to what rules we create for ourselves as artists, or like how often you have to post or this or that. One thing since the pandemic I have noticed is that people are touring differently. See a lot of people doing weekends rather than going out for like weeks at a time, which is I think smarter also, and it's easier for DJs rather than bands. But I have seen some things change post pandemic because everyone realized it wasn't healthy.
I like to tell people that we should make social media work for us, and we don't work for social media. And that constant, like, I gotta be posting. I mean, that's just a, a road to hell, paved with good intentions. So yeah, I'm glad to hear you talk about that. It's good to see leaders in our space say, you know what, I'm going to take some time off. And you're not, it's a game of relevancy, but like, look, if your music is good and your project is good, your fans will be there. And I just think that that's something that, and with your team, right? I would be curious to hear what your conversation with your management, your team is about around that. Like, it's better to have your mental health than to be burnt out.
I was feeling burnt out from touring right before the pandemic happened, and I switched managements in between that because my old manager retired. But it was definitely something I was conscious of when I returned to the space. I didn't want to feel like that again, or like I was going through the motions of touring rather than actually being excited and feeling like I had new music to show. It's balancing this, the creative time with the touring and your life. You have like I didn't have a life for years because I was just pouring it all into touring. It's necessary at a certain point. You got to survive, if that's your main form of income. But I'm really, really grateful that I've kind of taken the time to find all of these things in a way that I can feel like I'm in control of, what I'm doing, and I'm checking in on myself rather than just like flinging myself into the abyss, which I was doing for a long time.
I had a note about Lollapalooza and that being sort of this full circle moment for you.
Yeah, I played Lollapalooza last summer, which was incredible. It's definitely a bucket list festival, but especially because the first festival I ever went to was Lollapalooza. That actually was in 2006 when I was in high school. My older brother took me. We drove from St. Louis, and my car broke down on the way. It was a full festy experience. So, yeah, it was. I mean, like, if I would have told that version of myself that I would be on one of those stages, years later, I would not have believed you. So that was just wild to be able to come back to that first experience and have all those memories come back, and like that's one of those pivotal moments where you really you're forced to reflect on how far you've come. You're just like, wow, I'm here.
Amazing.
And so that was
Yeah, Lollapalooza is a special one for me. I think that was the first festival that I ever went to as well. I saw, let's see, like Tool,
oh
Snoop
really?
Dogg, Metallica, I think like Pearl Jam. I mean, this was the early, and this is when Perry Farrell owned it. So I'm older than you, obviously, and so
Oh
that was when it used to tour around the country, right? And so, yeah,
holy
and then
shit.
they stopped. Lollapalooza stopped for some time, of a couple years, and then C3. You know, I'm based in Austin, Texas. C3 bought Lollapalooza. They also throw Austin City Limits, and so I know some of the people that work for it. So one is Bobby Clay. He's the talent buyer. I'm sure you know Bobby, and then
Yep. Yeah, we
yeah,
booked it.
and then on top of that is like before it was Perry's tent, and it was just a little ass tent. Was the electronic music, right?
I've
Yeah.
heard the
And so like
stories, but
I went there
yeah,
one
it's
year. I worked for
wild.
a company called Blastro where we did like online music videos and we would interview people and we go to ACL, we go to Lollapalooza. I interviewed like Beats Antique, who I later managed. I interviewed the Glitch Mob, who are now like good, and these are
Yeah.
all people's like, you know, seminal come up years. I got to take pictures of the Glitch Mob when they played on and I think I went to the tent when it was still a tent, and DJ Mel, who became Obama's DJ, he works for C3. He's one of our like, you know, beloved
Oh my.
heroes of Austin, Texas. And so he managed Perry's tent, and now I think he's the stage manager for Perry's stage. Um, I mean, I think at the time,
Oh
and you know,
wow.
it's in Chicago, so at the time I walked up to him and it's this little tent. I'm like, hey bud, and there's these two guys playing. I was like, who are these guys? And then he's like, oh, they're Flostradamus. Do you know Flostradamus? And of course, later, you know, years they're massive acts. So it's been amazing. It's been amazing to see people like one, how electronic music has grown. You know, Bobby Clay buys, you know, the talent buyer for much of the electronic music and that stage for C3, and the fact that, you know, he was a close friend of mine in Austin. So it's just such a cool story that Lollapalooza has like championed, you know, artists like yourself, Closey, and really, you know, those are not the first stops. You know, usually you're going to play a Coachella, or, you know, you're going to play like a Sonic Bloom in these regional, you know, sort of more little less known festivals. But once you've played Lollapalooza, it feels like a
Yeah.
huge checkbox. So congrats on that one. That's awesome.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean that was huge, and I got to play Coachella a couple months ago, so that was another bucket list. And in 2 weeks I'll be at
Wow.
Bonnaroo, so checking those big
Yeah,
boys
that's
off the
awesome.
list this year.
Yeah, how
So
was Coachella? Like it's, you know, it can be I'll say, I'll go first and say it can be a very challenging festival. Like, you know, you're dealing
yeah,
with a lot. There's a lot of different
yeah,
people with a lot of different agendas, and they may or may not care about your music or whatever, you
yeah.
know.
It was amazing. I think after I got off stage, a couple people, or I think Tucker Gumber, you know him,
Yeah.
festival guy. He came up to me afterwards and was like, I didn't want to tell you this before you went on, but you had like notoriously the hardest slot to keep people at this stage because it was like right when the bigger stages opened up. So everyone like gave me props that I, actually brought people and that they stayed. People were in and out throughout the set, which I expected. You know, there's a lot to see. Um, but it was definitely like just the magnitude of those festivals are kind of mind blowing. Like I almost missed my own set because I didn't realize how long it was going to take to get inside the actual festival. Like I played in Boulder the night before. It was on 420, and we flew into Santa Ana, and it took us 4 hours to get down there. And then if you looked at like the festival grounds, it's just like red, traffic. You have to go get your credentials and drive to the other side and get in and get multiple golf carts, and yeah, it was just like insane. I rolled up with 10 minutes to spare,
Wow.
took a shot of tequila and went
Wow.
on
All
stage.
right.
Right.
Wow. Plug and play, huh? Good deal.
Yeah.
Well,
it could have been to my benefit because I would have been like pacing anyway. So, but yeah, it was definitely a lucky
Yeah, I
break.
think that that segues nicely into like your style and your sound. I think you have a lot of different influences, and that seems that if I would guess, like
Mhm.
your that electro soul vibe coupled with all the other all the other things else that are going on there, but that's a feel good party. Like you're gonna have a good time when you're listening to a Maddy O'Neal set. There's all sorts of good stuff happening in there. So
Yeah,
I have no doubt. I'm excited. That's awesome that you
thanks.
carry that.
Yeah,
Yeah, because I mean, we had Bulk and Bump on the podcast, and he talked about it, and it was like it was hot, it was early. It's a big space, so like you're trying to fill that, and like it can be a challenge for sure. Yeah.
right. Yeah, I mean, I was just on pure adrenaline at that point. I literally ran up to the stage and started playing. So, I mean, the water gun, the water gun scenario that they have is like really good for getting people to
Yeah.
interact and stay. And I think the Dulab I mean, it's just cool that they're like representing up and
Yeah.
coming artists in such a space
Absolutely.
like that.
Yeah.
I'm
I'm
glad
wearing
that
my Dulab
they
hat right now, actually.
holding it. All right,
I,
shout
I love them so
out.
much. I mean, just back from Lightning in a Bottle, and they are such a yeah, they are such a tastemaker. If kind of if they're putting somebody on their bill, I always pay attention to it, and I feel so honored to get to help them with their Thunder stage, because so many artists that we've worked with friends and family have played that. It's just it's such a beautiful experience.
Yeah, were you the stage
Yeah, so yeah,
manager
I
in the
stage manage
Thunder?
that's the Thunder stage, which is the more electronic, bass music focused stage. Um,
I think I played that in 2018,
yes, yeah, I don't think I
the
had
Thunder
taken
stage,
over yet.
but it's,
Oh, we did. Oh, we did.
yeah, but yeah, hopefully
I
I'll be
bet you
back
will.
next
I
year.
bet you will. I'll throw your name in the hat for sure. Yeah, speaking of like cool news, like, and I know friends of yours, like the Pretty Lights coming back. Like, thoughts, ideas? Are you
Yeah,
stoked? I'm sure there's things you can't talk about.
I'm super
Yeah.
excited. Yeah, I'm super excited. My team is the Pretty Lights team.
Mhm.
Phil, my manager, is also,
Yeah.
Phil, but for everybody else. Um, yeah, Phil and his whole team that I came to know in the beginning of my career is still working with him. So it's kind of like this resurgence of just that whole family that welcomed me in early on. It was kind of playing those shows with Pretty Lights, like the episodic dates that I did, and Red Rocks, and now being managed by the same manager, and those people that have become some of my best friends. Was kind of like the first scenario where I felt like I had like a place in the music industry. They welcomed me in like I was like part of their crew, which was amazing. So definitely family vibes, and I'm super excited to see what Derek's gonna do. I uh, I will say that at a certain point when he was absent, I made it. I hated being directly associated with him all the time. Like I didn't want to be just like a Pretty
Mhm.
Lights artist. As much as I loved that was my intro. I think I've managed to kind of carve out my own lane so much more so than when I started, which I'm really proud of. Um, I have my lane that I can't really compare to a lot of other people, which is
Yeah.
kind of the goal. So I'm happy that I got away from that direct kind of like underling situation that I felt when I was coming up, which was totally amazing and necessary in the beginning. But yeah, it's cool to be able to reconnect with that family where I am now,
Yeah.
also, where I don't feel as like, you know, I'm still in the umbrella, but I'm
No,
Maddy.
I
You know what I mean?
totally see what you're saying. I mean, I think it says, speaks to a lot of what we've talked about. Like, you took time during the pandemic to release this, wonderful album, all sorts of different influences. You've collabed with all sorts of people, Bulk and Bump, Closey, all these different artists, and you kept going. I mean, honestly, there's so much to say about just continuing to put one foot in front of the other, especially in the music business. And a lot of the people that were under that umbrella aren't really doing stuff anymore. And it's what we've been saying about mental health. It's not an easy business. I'm glad that Derek took time off and got
Yeah,
hopefully sober and worked out some of those things, because that was his. I think this is an interesting thing to talk about. His rise to fame was so fast and so powerful and so much pressure. And it's not a surprise that drugs and alcohol and mental health were challenges. And it's I'm sure you can speak to this. Like, those are real trappings as you start to get famous and known. It's easy to lose your head, right?
yeah. Because
Yeah,
it's everywhere. It's
yeah,
easy to do. And if everyone's
yeah.
doing it. But yeah, Derek is super happy and healthy and sober and
That's good.
inspired and like stoked about music and returning. It's a really cool resurgence to, you know, hear about and
Yeah,
soon witness. And I think it's really incredible that he is bringing Michael back with him
yeah,
also, which I don't know if you've seen. Yeah. So, they started Pretty Lights together, and that was, it's a thing for a long time. I think Michael always wanted to be a part of the project, but because of a lot of complications, he didn't end up being there. But Derek was like, if I'm going to come back, I want to do it with you. And that makes it so much more
yeah,
special to me because Michael was one of my main mentors in general, and one of my best friends. And
yeah,
yeah, so that was very heartwarming to see. And I know Michael is super pumped too. So one of the things that I'm most excited about is for this like new generation to discover this sound, because I think that it's going to be a really awesome resurgence of just like melodic, like, beautiful, feel good electronic music. Because there's a lot of like really dark, heavy stuff
mm,
happening right now. And I think this is going to be like a really good light on the other side. Um, it's just going to be cool to watch people discover him for the first time.
absolutely. Yeah, I love that. I'm of the same mind. I'm not knocking it, but like, I'm not really down with rhythm or the subtronics. Like, that's just, it's so aggressive, and I just don't need that
Yeah,
energy. I don't know what to do with it, even when it comes at me. Oh, okay. Yeah, and I think the fact that Pretty Lights and the electro soul sound has so much, obviously it's so rooted in so much musical history. And when you find, oh, that sample came from this
yeah,
song, and like, it's just like this magnificent musical puzzle and cacophony of sounds and styles and genres blending. I mean, that's one of the most beautiful things about electronic music. I was going to say about Michael, like, I actually
yeah,
know some of the like really crazy stories about how all of that went down and how he wasn't able to go on the tour and all of that. I'm not obviously not going to share that here, but it
yeah.
is such a beautiful thing for him to come back and for them to reunite. And like, when we're talking about the story of your life, like,
I
that's
know.
such a cool way to like, okay, this didn't really go down how any of them wanted, and now they can really kind of have some healing and growth together and like live
Yeah,
that time together. So that's amazing. It's gonna be awesome.
yeah. It's like 2.0. You got a chance to like, you know, not like make that
Yeah,
right, but you know what I
do it
mean. Like
again.
do it how they do it how they wanted to do it if the odds weren't
Yeah,
against them.
Oh man. Well, so what do you have coming up? I know you've been working on some more music. You got sounds like you got some dates. You got Bonnaroo coming up. What else? What else is in the pipeline?
Yeah. I actually just finished an EP last
Nice.
night. So I am in that like
Oh
celebratory
yeah.
mode today, I think. I'll need to give it one more rinse, make sure they're actually final. But yeah, I just finished up a 4-track EP. It's called Mind Over Matter. And I'm going to be trickling out those songs over the next 4 months. So that's exciting. It's kind of like my last record, Ricochet, was like definitely more, had a more like serious note to it. And I think I worked out so many parts of my brain working on that album that I really needed to get out,
Hmm.
I think. Just so many different avenues. Like it definitely had like a serious undertone in my opinion. It was like emotional and deep. And this record is or this EP is kind of a little more playful, like bassy and synthy for like a live environment rather than like a listening record. Like there's a lot of songs on Ricochet that I probably won't
Hmm.
ever play live as they are. I did 2 remix albums. There's plenty of versions I can play of them. But in the initial making of it, my intentions were not thinking about playing these songs live. So this one's like a little bit more just a little more fun, playful, kind of like I could picture myself being on stage
Nice. Nice.
while writing them. So
That's
yeah.
awesome. Well, I'm excited to hear it. Mind over matter. There we go. Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that and I have a bunch of festivals I'm prepping for. Bonnaroo is the most immediate. That's next weekend, Friday, and then I come home and play Sonic Bloom on Sunday. Um, and then there's June Jam in Arizona, a festival in Vegas with Sound Tribe. Um, I just did summer camp. My brain is I'm trying to think of my tour
That's all
schedule.
good. Yeah, that's great.
uh, yeah. I have a bunch of festivals in Canada too, like Frenzy Festival and Sonic Springs. I'm actually headlining, and Rifflandia, which is in BC somewhere. Yeah, yeah, I got a good
Yeah,
good
you've got a
festival
good,
lineup
yeah,
this
North
this summer
Coast. North
into the
Coast is a
fall.
great one. Or yeah, Secret
Yeah,
Dreams, that's another one. And are you doing you
yep,
doing
you're
something
cheating.
in Mishawaka?
Yeah, me and Late Night Radio are doing a co-headline at the Mish in July, which is really exciting because he's actually like my oldest friend in the music industry. We like met playing for 5 people
Oh,
in Boulder at like like back in I don't know 2011, and we just became instant friends because we were making similar styles of music, and I haven't played with him in a while, so that will be a fun one too. I don't know. It's just good to catch up with you in general. I've seen you in passing over the years, but I don't think we've got a solid hang in. So I appreciate you having me on
absolutely.
here, and it's cool that like you are the person that's like doing something like this because I know you've been a part of the music industry in so many different avenues. So for you to be able to talk to people and tell these stories,
Oh,
I think is
thank
awesome.
you.
So
Thank
I'm
you. I
happy you're doing it.
appreciate it.